3, 2.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome to today's Women's Wellness Masterclass on finding balance in life. We are so happy to have all of you joining us today with our very respected and distinguished speakers. And before I introduce myself and our guest speakers to you, let me take a moment to tell you about our webinar sponsors. First of all, we have Imamiya Medics International and also Shia Muslim Council of Southern California. Imamiya Medics is a global platform for Shia Muslim health and science professions to not only offer health education and services, but to also provide, provide support to the underserved populations globally. Now, at its core, IMI has pledged its time and resources to empower all disadvantaged communities worldwide with access to quality healthcare and education. And the Shia Muslim Council of Southern California is an independent umbrella organization, and it's comprised of various Shia Muslim centers, masjids, and organizations. The primary objective of SMC is to provide a platform to facilitate the exchange of ideas and experiences and to enhance and support religious, social, humanitarian, and educational development initiatives, and to also cooperate with like-minded organizations like Imamiya Medics in order to advance unity amongst Muslims all around. So thank you both to Imamiya Medics and also to Shia Muslim Council for putting on today's webinar. I will take a brief moment to introduce myself. My name is Leila Naji, and I have a master's degree in psychology from the University of Laverne, where I also am a professor, and it's a concentration on marriage and family therapy. I have my own life coaching and counseling business. And if you would like to follow along or have any inquiries, you can find me at Life Coach Leila on Instagram. However, I also do a lot of work with SMC, and I really love the focus that is happening through many Muslim organizations these days on wellness in general and specifically mental wellness. And so I'm very privileged, very honored to be in a crowd of such distinguished, respected, and intelligent women, and I cannot wait to learn from all of them tonight, inshallah. We are going to begin the program with Sister Rukhsar Sayani, and she is a recent graduate from UCLA, mashallah, where she received a Bachelor's of Arts in Applied Linguistics and Education Studies. She currently serves as the Director of Events for the Unified Muslim Network, which is a youth organization under the Shia Muslim Council. Throughout the year, she can be found reciting Urdu poetry and elegies of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam at the local mosques and ladies programs. Sister Rukhsar, we look forward to what you have to share with us tonight. Please take it away.
Thank you, Sister Leila, for that warm introduction. To everyone present here with us or who may be watching later on, Assalamu alaikum. Hadrasa, can we please have the slides? Thank you. So inshallah, I will be talking about how to find balance in life from my perspective as a recent college graduate. Next slide, please. So here, what I have for you, and because I myself, as a visual learner, I thought it'd be easier for me to explain how I find balance in my personal life. So I decided to put all these elements that are pertinent in my life in a bubble diagram. So all of these elements have equal weight, and in the center is me. Now, there is definitely an overlap between the elements at different magnitudes, at different points of my life, depending on the circumstances. But for the purposes of this presentation, they have their own delineated bubble. And in the center is me, and it's represented by a larger circle because I'm the main character of my life. And the rest of the elements help shape my life, including my identity and my personality. And within me is included my identity, personality, mental, and physical health. Next slide. So when I started college about 4 years ago, the weight of these elements began to shift. Majority of my day and time was being dedicated towards my education. I was also a commuter student, so I was going to UCLA from home, and we're all familiar with the notorious LA traffic and how long that takes. So a good chunk of that would be taken away from commuting. I had also recently started working at my first job, which was at a different location. So commuting there, dedicating time there was also taking some of my time away. Now, my connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the form of deen and my family life was a little bit stagnant. It wasn't changing too much, but I did have goals in mind for how I wanted to enhance that, push that further. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it a point to really push it forward. At this time, my social life was also taking a hit because I wasn't involved that much on campus. My high school friends had moved on into their lives. I wasn't as connected with them, but primarily because on campus, I didn't feel connected with my Shia identity. There weren't too many resources in the MSc that catered to Shia students to facilitate the balance between deen, studies, community service, and social life. We also have to take into consideration that my academics included rigor, which took away a lot of the time. And I also found that towards my third year, my service towards the community also had to be limited. I was a teacher at Sunday school, Sunday school, and since the rigor of my classes was increasing, I had to shift my time away from that to be able to focus on that. Next slide. So now what was happening was I had entered the red zone, and red usually indicates danger. And what happened was the academic rigor and the transition into college was so intense, I was stressed out majority of the time. So with stress as is, my mental health began to take a hit. And we know that mental health has an impact on physical health as well. So poor mental health means poor physical health. I was having headaches. I could not sleep that well. And there's a concept that those of you who have attended college may be familiar with, or if not, and you know someone who is, it's called freshman 15. And essentially what happens is as soon as you enter college, because there's food readily available, you may tend to binge eat, you increase by 15 pounds. And ironically, the opposite happened to me. I had ended up losing 15 pounds throughout that year. And I know for some people that may be great, and I know it's not the healthiest way to lose weight, but for someone like myself, it was actually a problem since I could not retain my weight. The things that helped me relax, helped me focus on self-care, to rejuvenate, I was doing less of, because of the academic pressure to do well and the fear of not graduating in time and ultimately not succeeding. I felt guilty for taking care of myself when I thought I should be instead taking care of my studies, because that's what would lead me into my future. And surprisingly, this experience is not unique to me. It's actually the experience of many students. An excerpt from a book titled The Real World College by Wendy Fishman and Howard Gardner. They analyzed detailed interviews with over 2,000 students, alumni, faculties, administrators, teachers, trustees, etc. And they found that a good proportion of students found mental health to be the biggest problem, and not because they were alone in facing it, but because it was a widespread issue for the larger community. And majority of the students of the study cited academic rigor or the pressure to do well as the leading source for mental health distress. But what exactly does this pressure entail? And the most common explanation had to do with what the excerpt describes as achieving external measures of success, which is what getting good grades, having a good GPA, graduating with honors to set you up for a good job or get into grad school. And surprisingly, this wasn't just the case at more selective schools where we may expect it, but it seemed to be a universal issue, a challenge across schools. Another category under academic rigor was defined as the academic workload. And this was essentially If I can give an example, when I was taking a general ed class in my freshman year, so that was a 5-unit class, and my professor had broken it down for us how much time outside of class we should be dedicating towards this class. There were 3 lectures a week for 1 hour each, and she said that because it was a 5-unit class, outside of class, I should be dedicating about 15 hours towards the success of that class, which is a lot of time. If a person works for about 40 hours a week, that's almost a fourth of that. Perhaps the most expected category was what they called the drive to satisfy internal standards of perfection. I found myself now to be a perfectionist. I realized I was doing this a lot with GEs as well. Now, what are GEs? They are requirements that you only need to graduate. They're not central to your time at the university. They're only there to make you a well-rounded student. But I had this internal standard to be perfect in that class, to the point where I couldn't even stand taking a B in the class. I had to strive for an A, and in classes that I was not affiliated with. And I know that this is a desired skill for many professions. Now that I'm heading into the workforce, this is a very desired profession, a skill, but we need to know how much of it apply to one faculty of life. And ultimately, the question remains, how can I strive to reconfigure the balance of these bubbles? How can I bring it back to where we started? Next slide, please. How does this translate to the life that I want to lead ahead? And I realize now that that requires unlearning certain life patterns and routines. And when I thought about how can I succinctly impart advice about gaining balance, I remembered hearing from this lecture, this hadith from Imam al-Qasim alayhi salam on how to manage your time. Essentially, finding balance comes down to effectively managing your time in order to achieve your tasks and goals. And the way Imam alayhi salam does this is he states to divide your time into 4 parts. And the unique thing about this is that there are life coaches, psychologists, psychotherapists at the current moment letting us know about these tactics. Time management is one of the most important lessons that we are taught heading into college, heading into work. But several decades ago, the Imam alayhi salam already showed us how to do this. And he says that the first slot should be for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for your ibadah. And when you section out this time from your calendar, you'll be able to make it a priority. I find it so incredible that the times for salah are also distributed throughout the day, such that the rest of your tasks can be centered around it, so that you're not burdening all of your ibadah into one time where it seems burdensome, unachievable, but that it's delineated throughout the day so that you can take time to reflect, you can take time to rejuvenate, and use that as your means of heading into the rest of your tasks. Nevertheless, one of the major struggles of students is not being able to take out that time for ibadah and spiritual development. And it's because studies take so much of their time away. But one thing that I find reassurance in is that learning, education, seeking knowledge is so important, so central to Islam. There are numerous hadith on it. And we can also use this as a way to increase our connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, as a linguistics major, one of the things that truly drew me into this major was the way children learn language. I cannot tell you, when I was reading this chapter in Steven Pinker's book, who is a famous psycholinguist, he talked about the ways children learn language, and I cannot stress how much of a profound respect I had for the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it really makes you think that there has to be this unique one creator who can create this because of the way it's functionable. It's not possible for us to even mimic that. We're still struggling to create AI and speech technology. Additionally, nowadays, there are so many resources available for a daily dose of knowledge and spirituality, podcasts, lectures, and these have become more widespread with the pandemic. We can now find lectures on YouTube, podcasts on your iPhone, and while you're driving to school, while you're driving to work, you can listen to it, gain something from it to rejuvenate yourself spiritually. One thing to also keep in mind is that if you are starting anything, it's to keep achievable goals and focus more on quality than quantity. It's not important for you to recite so many ayah of the Quran as it is for you to focus on a few where you can reflect and you can use those to improve yourself. The next slot that Imam al-Qasim alayhi salam told us to focus on is work. And it's important to note that work is a part of your life and not your whole life. So now, as a student, I was finding myself working on weekends as well, which is not healthy. I'm going to school 5 days out of the week. I'm also spending the 2 days that are supposed to be for me to relax, for me to rejuvenate, get ready for Monday. But now I'm using that to stay up and do late night readings, to do the rest of my homework. And I'm unlearning to do that. I have to push myself not to open my laptop, not to check my emails on weekends. The third is spending time with people who are beneficial to your development and your environment. These are trustworthy people who are sincere to you and tell you your shortcomings. You don't want to spend time with people who are toxic, who will hinder your development. And the two criteria that Imam al-Qadim alayhi salam gives are those who are A, sincere, and B, who tell you your shortcomings. And telling your shortcomings is not meant to degrade you or plummet your self-esteem. But as a good friend, as a good sister or brother, this person will be honest with you. They'll hold you accountable so that you're more self-aware. You can improve yourself to become a better version of yourself. And in my personal opinion, I find that such people tend to be so driven themselves. They help you find the balance in your life because they aren't interested in the little things like the drama and the gossip, but rather they're interested in advancing their life and in their spiritual goals. And in that sense, you can tell how sincere they are because their feedback doesn't come, their feedback comes from a place of good. They will not tell you these things in public where it's possible for you to be humiliated. Next slide, please. And the fourth and last but not least, you do something that helps you relax and unwind. And of course, this refers to doing something that is a halal form of seeking relaxation. And the reason that this is in a different shade of green is because it has an effect on the other three. Imam al-Qadim alayhi salam says that this helps you achieve the capability to perform the other three slots. So if we go back, remember we talked about the me part in my diagram that became red. This is what I'm referring to. And as I mentioned, I rarely made the time to do things that were authentically, wholesomely, helped me relax and unwind, not fully understanding at the moment that this was essential for me to be able to perform the tasks that were actually taking away my time. And when I had entered my third year, that's when I truly began to understand that, look, the pressure is the same as it was in the first year. That hasn't changed. If anything, it has increased. And perhaps it's always going to be that way. But what did you lose during this time? You lost your health, you lost your happiness. So you need to make that time for yourself because nobody else is going to make that time for you. And one of the ways that I'm doing that right now, and recently I had read a book, and of course it was a fictional book, but I gained an important lesson out of it. And it was that the main character of the story was experiencing really challenging life circumstances. So her partner told her, let's go on a run. And this was somebody who did not like any form of exercise, but she still decided to go. And she found that after she ran, she gained a serotonin boost, which made her feel happy, made her feel motivated. So after I read that, I decided, let me give running a try. So I've been running for about a month now, and I find that every time I do that, I feel more refreshed and I actually feel more motivated to work because a lot of my work is on the computer. I'm sitting hours in front of the computer a day. I need to go out. I need to look at the sun. I need to be in touch with the world around me. And this is what will help me be in more touch with my virtual world as well. Next slide. So I'd like to end with some key takeaways. And the first is knowing your boundaries and priorities. So you have to understand how much you can take onto your plate. You can't take upon too many tasks and expect to achieve them all. We have to learn to prioritize what's important at the moment and what can be dealt with later. Another nuance of this is the difficulty of saying no, what people refer to as people pleasing. So it's not easy to say no, especially if you have internal standards of perfectionism. In the excerpt that I had mentioned earlier, there was a first year student who said, and it's hard because everybody here wants to do as much as they possibly can, and people don't know in general how to say no. I will tell you, I am 1000% guilty of this. But one of the things that I found is that if your mindset is task-based, where you like to do things in tasks, assigning yourself tasks to make sure you get them done, what you can do is think of this as a way of saying no. Say that I can't take this on right now, but I can take it on at some other point. It's not directly saying no to it. It's saying that I'm pushing it away for a time where I'm more available and I can actually give my 100% to this. That way, you're not doing a disservice to the things that are currently on your plate or the ones that you're taking on later on. And what I found was doing in my research was that Sheikh Osama al-Attar, he advises delegating tasks because he says that this is a sign of a good leader, one who knows how to delegate tasks. The second is sectioning out your time. And as I mentioned on the last slide, this is to slot out time for your task. And that doesn't mean multitasking. It means giving each task its appropriate and designated time. And I won't go into too much detail regarding this since we covered it. Imam Al-Qadim will do a far superior job than any of us in explaining this. But one thing that I want to add is and stress is in regards to the me time. Like I said, I work in a task-based mindset. So sometimes I think this is the time, this is a task where I need to take care of myself. And this will help me. It's the pre-work that will help me become efficient for the other tasks. It's the stretching of the running that I'm about to do. If I stretch now, I will have a greater blood flow. I will be able to run. I'll have a more successful workout. And last but not least, and perhaps in my opinion, the most important, is in addition to having time management, you need to have a good and reliable support system, both in your personal life and wherever you're working. So if you're working on site or on your campus, there needs to be services available for you for this to be facilitated. Having open communication, sharing, delegating your tasks will help you become less overwhelmed. There'll be someone over there who'll be able to help mitigate the stress in your life. And if you are stressed, then it's very important for you to seek out the right resources, because that's only going to facilitate you in heading in the direction where you want to be. But more important to students is having the support system on campus. I first-handedly experienced this. So I am a firm believer that institutions need to be more conducive of students' learning by accommodating to their needs, especially their religious needs. For example, if you have a prayer space delineated on campus, a congregational dua or lecture, this will only facilitate students to increase their connection to Islam, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also help them take care of the other faculties of their life. So with that, I conclude the presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Sister Ruxar. And even though we are in very different seasons of life, you and I can relate so much on a personal level to the things that you shared, but also having a middle schooler and a high schooler, I can see these behaviors beginning from now. And, you know, they're nowhere near college, but I wanted to ask you, especially since you spoke about linguistics and you spoke about the way that children learn language. In my practice, what I often do is there's a saying that we use very often, which is the way that we speak to children becomes their inner voice. And so as we were talking about these internal expectations that we place on ourselves, the perfectionism, I remember when I started my master's, my daughter was 6 months old and I had a pregnancy in between, and I still wanted straight A's also, you know, I still had that expectation of myself. And so I know it's partly internal, but we're also internalizing external standards. So I was wondering if you could speak as a Muslim woman who was raised in a collectivistic mindset, however, is living in a Western environment, which very much pushes us to that competitive, individualistic, getting to the top mindset. What is that like for somebody like you at your age, your season of life to balance out? And how hard is it to set boundaries with, your more collectivistic side of your family? And also at the same time, let go of some of that competitiveness and ruthlessness that's encouraged by the Western world.
One of the things that I particularly find comfort in is knowing how you can define success for yourself. Success looks different for everyone else. And so I've decided, and this is actually what has shaped the field that I'm heading in. At first, I was motivated to head into fields that I thought would be more conducive in the workforce and leading me into success economically. But I realized that if I'm going to chase that, if I'm just going to chase these external standards of what looks like success, that's not going to be possible. Everything has an internal and external component. So if that internal component is flawed, it doesn't have any base, it's not going to lead anything for the external component. You need to make sure that you have a clear mindset of what you would like to pursue, and make sure that you are pursuing that because you love it, not because it's only going to lead you to a success. That success will come along because you're so passionate about something, you care deeply about it, so you will naturally put in that effort. Um, and even right now, one of the things that I'm primarily struggling with is entering the workforce. It is not easy. Schools only prepare us with the knowledge that we need for that specific field, but how do we go about translating that in a professional sense? That is something that at the university level I was not taught. And so every day I struggle and think, oh my God, am I going to start working soon? Am I going to start working soon? But what keeps me going is my faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that I'm trying everything that is in my control. There's only certain things that I can do, and the rest is left in his hands. The success will come to me if I put in whatever effort there is, and I leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take care of.
That's wonderful. And what a great testament to your strong faith and iman. And um, you're so well spoken. And the fact that you have even can wrap your mind around these ideas right now at this age, where some of us who are much, much older than you are still struggling with this, I think is a wonderful thing. And inshallah, it will ease every coming step in your future, which inshallah will go just the way that you want it to. And for all of our people who registered and who are watching, please, if you would like to ask Sister Ruxar any questions, please put them into the chat and we can ask them now, or we can ask them if we have time, hopefully at the end of the program also. But for now, I would like to thank you for those precious, precious words of wisdom. And I'm definitely going to be taking some things away. And I can't wait to learn more from our next speaker. And that is going to be Sister Shabnam Juji. And I believe that she will be a very familiar face and name to many of you. And she has always been an inspiration to so many of us and continues to be, mashallah. Sister Shabnam is a former operations executive specializing in creating sustainable operational environments poised for growth. Sister Shabnam advocates leadership among minorities and wants to be a part of the quantum leap to welcome the next generation of women leaders. She facilitates leadership programs for corporate and nonprofit centers of excellence and volunteers her time for the Nasimco Capacity Building and Personal Development Program. She is currently in her 21st year as the principal of the Husseini Sunday School in the Los Angeles area and has been a teacher of Islamic education for 33 years, mashallah. She's particularly motivated to help the growth and development of teenagers and young adults and enjoys mentoring them on a regular basis, attending camps and facilitating workshops. She also delivers lectures on a regular basis with a focus on self-development as a journey to spiritual elevation. Sister Shabnam is an active and in inter and intra-faith activities in her Southern California community and considers it her mission to change someone's perception of a Muslim by getting to know one. Her favorite quote is this one by Khalil Gibran. I slept and I dreamed that life is all joy. I woke, I saw that life is all service. I served and I knew that service is joy. And I know that she definitely lives by that quote, as we have all seen, and she's an example to all of us. Sister Shabnam, please take it away.
Thank you, Sister Layla. I don't know how to take off after Rukhsar. She did such an amazing job. I have taken notes myself. And my part in tonight's wellness and balance is I'm going to, I remember something that a good friend of mine, a co-worker of mine many years ago, was going to see a life coach. And she came to me and she said, you know, Shabnam, you never have a problem with balancing your life. And I have to go and seek help. And I have no family. But I learned something that I wonder if you can take away. And I said, always a student. She said, maybe my coach told me, maybe you don't start using the word balance. Maybe we start using the word sustainable. Can I be sustainable? Because there is no balance when you juggle. But is the way I do things and the length of time I do things sustainable for my well-being? And I banked off of that word because sometimes words can mean different things to different people. And when she and I had that conversation, I thought it was an amazing realization for me that we seek balance in our lives, but at the end of the day, if we want that, kind of like what Rukhsar said about perfection, then we're going to always be chasing something because we're not going to find it. And I love the way these terminologies of setting boundaries and learning how to know when enough is enough for oneself, taking time out for me are all parts of the equation. Now, I've gone through that, the education, the raising of children. And I have to say, one of the aha moments for me is when I was doing that, there was no internet. So when we went to work, and by the way, there's pros and cons for that. You have the work from home ability today. I didn't. I had a 3-hour commute every day. And I did that for over 20 years. People in my generation did that. It was nothing for them. And this was in Los Angeles. But when you think about the time you spend on the road, I use that to self-reflect. So I did not let that become a stressful time for me. And when I had to work late, which I did, and I traveled for work as well, I used those as an opportunity to see things in a different point of view. And at the end of the day, what I learned from those experiences is when I was done with work, I could leave it at work. The situation is very different today. And I see that in my children and the younger generation. They can never turn off. And I remember going back to perhaps 10 years ago, I had a manager who would send out instructions on a Sunday morning. And, you know, I just called him one day and said, Chris, you do this on a Sunday morning. Are you expecting a response on a Sunday morning? He said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's my downtime before I start my work week. And I said, well, that's great, but it would help us if you communicated that because your team thinks we all need to now start working on Sundays. And he said, no. So he sent out a note saying, please disregard the timestamp on these instructions or emails. I don't expect you to see them until the next day. Now, at that point, we all had our handheld devices, so we were able to see them. But it was very important for me to set, I think perhaps maybe that boundary or to clarify what is the expectation. These are skills you learn in your journey of life, in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, in your 50s. And these skills that you learn are priceless. And they're only priceless if you put them to use. Decades ago, and this I will share because I know it transformed the way I looked at life. I attended a workshop and it had to do with managing stress. And the workshop was conducted by this man who didn't really use a lot of presentation. It was a lot of activity and words and interaction. And he brought out a plate. It was one of these reusable plates. And he said, and he put ping pong balls on it. And he said, consider the plate your day. And every ball represents the things you do in a day. And he said, this ball might represent, I have to pick up my dry cleaning today. This ball might represent, I have a dentist appointment today. This ball might represent, and he named all of them. Well, pretty soon we realized that the entire plate was filled with these balls. And he said, okay, so you start your day. And you start your car and it doesn't start. Now what? You have left no space on your plate to allow for that. As soon as your car doesn't start, you don't even know if you'll get to that appointment. You don't even know if you'll make it to work. Now you have to deal with something you didn't plan for. And he said the key to managing stress is to allow yourself time in a day for the unexpected. And I thought that was brilliant. Because remember, this was a time when we didn't have cell phones. This was maybe 30 years ago. And without cell phone, you couldn't call into work. If your car broke down in the middle of the highway, you can't call anybody. And so the stress levels were different. And if you had to pick up your children or drop them off from school, it's even harder. So managing stress was another skill I learned very early on. And those are the lessons I used within my life as I developed in my own self, in my own family, and my own career. And then, of course, Rukhsar hit on faith. Nothing grounds us more than faith. And sometimes we're hard on ourselves, okay? We're hard on ourselves because we think we need to be better Muslims, or we need to be better, in reading Quran, or we need to better understand the hadith, or we need to do, no, that's again adding stress to yourself. Enjoy the journey. If that's what you want to do, have a starting point and then learn along the way. There is no end to learning. So why are you setting yourself for failure? Enjoy the journey. And in that journey is when you will discover the jewels, whether it comes from the Quran or it comes from the Hadith or it comes from your experiences in life. And once again, it was the Quran that helped me understand. And there is a verse in Surah number 5, Al-Ma'idah, ayah number 105, where Allah says to the believers, He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, alaykum anfusakum, la yadurrukum man dhalla idha ihtadaytum. He makes a promise to the believers. He says, look after yourselves. Especially if you're on the right path, you will never be harmed. And that to me was a message of wellness. Look after yourself so that you do not become agitated in the process. And that lesson I have tried to live in my life, because raising children, commuting to work, when you look deeper within yourself, we use the terminology now, personal development, the tip of the iceberg. What people see is just the tip of the iceberg. What's below that? What is driving that person? And then if I'm a teacher, my students see the tip of the iceberg when I'm a teacher. When I'm a mom, the children see that tip of the iceberg as a mother. When I'm a child, my parents see that tip of the iceberg as a child. When I'm at work, my co-workers and my company see me at that moment. We live different lives. People see perspectives based on the life we live. But there's a whole iceberg beneath that. And when we look at the entire iceberg beneath that, we start to develop our own self-awareness. When we dig deeper within ourselves until we reach that level of what Allah calls the fitra, what I have created you with, the pure and beautiful fitra. Until we reach to that core, there are all these things we need to understand about ourselves. Why did I pursue this education? Why did I even look like this? Why am I different from everybody else? Why is the color of my skin different? Why is the language I speak different? Who am I really? Or do I have an identity crisis? And so all of those questions, when you dig deeper, you start being more aware of oneself and you become more self-confident. You either become more comfortable in your skin, under your skin, or you start to develop areas where you know you need to work on because you realize that there are gaps. And so in my journey of life, this understanding of myself, what Allah calls ma'rifatun nafs, and the hadith of the Prophet says what? Man arafa nafsa, arafa rabba. Whoever has understood themselves has understood their Lord. And so as soon as you start to become more self-aware of your own limitations, of your own agitations, of your own things that you know you want to do differently, and you start to work on them, you automatically remove the barriers that stop you from getting there. That, to me, is another lesson I have learned in my life. Now, the plate and the ping pong balls, let's not pack our day. Let's not pack our day. Keep time for others, for unexpected things, for myself. And taking care of my own needs is a very important thing. Rukhsar pointed that out, and I'm sure we'll hear it throughout this evening. That taking care of ourselves is not just a physical health and not just a mental health. It's just overall health. And we do that in so many ways. One might look at prayer that way. We spend a little more time on prayer, it automatically calms us down. We become more aware of ourselves in that moment, what Oprah calls being in the zone. Whenever you are being somewhere, be present, be fully there so that you're not distracted. Prayer is one of them. Some people choose yoga, some people do stretching, some like to walk, some meditate. Whatever your way of your own self-awareness, do it. Relax your muscles, do the breathing exercises that you're supposed to do to let it go. That, to me, for someone who commuted 3 hours a day for decades, even until 2 years ago, and then to come home to now my stage in my life where I have elderly parents who need my support, where I have grandchildren now who I take care of and I support, which is the reason, by the way, when I saw my plate and I said, that's it, Allah sent me a message, and I got laid off during the pandemic, and I said, beautiful. My granddaughter was born, and that was it. I've taken a hiatus or early retirement, whatever you want to call it, or as Serena said, transition. And that, to me, is important because you recognize what your needs are and what your worth, self-worth is, and your capacity at that moment. And alhamdulillah, that's where I am today. But I wouldn't be here had I not developed these skills, had I not learned some of the challenges that I experienced, so that you take the lessons away. And sometimes it's in the attitude. It's the attitude, people. It's all in the attitude. Helen Keller, we know Helen Keller. Maybe some of us do. She couldn't see. She couldn't hear. She couldn't speak. She had none of these faculties. Yet she says, the attitude is to feel the rays of the sunshine on my face. She had no idea what sunshine looked like. She had no vision. Imagine, it was an attitude for her to become an educated woman who ended up teaching others in her own deficiencies. Amazing. Those are the people who inspire me. Now, was it easy? No. Is it ever going to be easy? No, because that was God's promise. It's not going to be easy, people. It'll be easy later, but not in this life. And so for me, I had to make it very clear what was important for me to get through this phases in my life. Alhamdulillah, you have a partner who supports you, is very important. And communication is key, people. You feel something, say it. Don't expect that other person to read your mind. They're not. And then you get mad at them because they didn't know. Did you say it? No. Then say it. Very important to communicate clearly. Just like my call to Chris, remember? I called him. You're sending me an email on Sunday morning. Are you expecting a response? That's all it takes. Clarify. Repeat back instructions so that you've heard the right thing. Then nobody gets offended. And take time off. You know, I'm an advocate. If you get 3 weeks vacation, 2 weeks vacation, 5 weeks vacation, take all of it. There's a reason they call it vacation. Get away from it. It's extremely important you use it. Don't be one of those people who, I don't have time to take time off. Make it. There's nothing more important than recharging your batteries. And it could be 1 week, and it just transforms people's attitude. So I say to you, and I heard from Rukhsar, that knowing your boundaries, taking time for yourself, managing your time, knowing when to say no, juggling your plate, keeping room for that empty spaces for the things that you don't expect. And inshallah, remember, those were the times when I did all this. There was no Uber, there was no DoorDash. You know, if there was no meal on the table, somebody had to place an order and go pick it up, and that was even more to coordinate. So who needs that? So what did I do? I taught Sunday school on Sundays, and Sunday afternoons was my meal prep time. Saturdays was my day off. Spend time with the children and my faith. Usually we would attend something on a Saturday night. And so make that time, create those compartments so that you are devoting equal time to everything, especially yourself. And on that note, inshallah, I hope we take away some learnings, and I am certainly doing the same here. So thank you, Sister Layla, Rukhsar, and Sister Amna for being in your company.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Shabnam. And there were times when you were speaking when I felt that, did she write this for me, or what is going on? And I'm sure a lot of people felt that way too, because, you know, the wonderful thing is that yourself and Sister Rukhsar are in such different seasons of life, but we're seeing the same themes to continue to be repeated about boundaries, about self-care, about acknowledging yourself as a person, having the insight to put yourself on the list of things to do and not just all of the other things. And I love examining the word balance and looking at, you know, this is the second time we've talked about the power of language, redefining success, redefining balance. And so we can redefine these things for ourselves, and we don't have to stick to the labels that society has assigned for us. So inshallah, again, I encourage anybody who has a question or a clarification or can identify with something that Sister Shabnam said to please go ahead and message us in the chat, and we will answer your question. And so thank you so much for that. And I will transition to our last but not least final speaker, Sister Amna. And I will introduce you to her. She is a biotech professional with over 20 years of experience. Her career has spanned across varied roles, including financial analysis, health economics, project management, marketing, pricing strategy, commercial forecasting, operations and corporate strategy, among others. And she earned her bachelor's degree in biology and a master's in business administration from California State University, Northridge, followed by a professional project manager certification, and completed an advanced project manager program from Stanford University. Sister Amna is co-founder of Imamiya Medics International SoCal and an active community volunteer. She is a wife, a mother of 2 college-going young adults, and 2 Russian blue cats. So as you can see, the speakers that we have are masters at balancing, juggling, sustaining, whatever you would call it. So impressive, mashallah. Sister Anna, I hand the time over to you.
Thank you so very much. I'm just going to do one thing technically to try to make sure my sound is working, so bear with me. Apologies.
None needed, as if I can hear you clearly.
Okay, I think I am good. All right, almost there. Everybody can see my screen? Okay, fantastic. So, Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and those are definitely, Sister Shabnam, if you thought you had a tall bar to meet, you've doubled it for me. Both of you you've humbled me with all of your experience from the different opposite spectrums of life. So definitely two tough acts to follow, but I will try my best to confirm a lot of the information that both of you have shared. So first of all, thank you, Sister Leila, for hosting, Brother Reza for managing all of our technology. Thank you to IMI SoCal and to SMC for inviting me tonight, especially on a topic that I am very passionate about because I've struggled with it for decades and I actually still struggle with it. All right, so let's get into this. I recently turned 46 years old and I bought this poster for my birthday present. So the way that this works is you give it the year of your birth, in my case, 1976. It automatically assumes that whoever purchased it will live till 88 years old, and then they deliver it to your front door. And all of those black boxes that come filled in, each black box represents 1 week in your life that you've already lived. And the point is now with the empty weeks that are left, as you live them, you fill in box by box. Now, you might think, gosh, that's such a morbid birthday present, but I bought this intentionally because I've realized that time now in my life, it's fleeting faster than it ever used to be. So I need to live it with intention. And that means work and life not being in balance, being in harmony, being integrated, and not opposing forces that I'm trying to balance. Work-life balance is a lie. Trying to find balance in these two opposing forces, it's exhausting. Trust me, I've tried. Instead, consider this alternative. Work and life should be interchangeable, seamlessly transition into each other, ebb and flow in and out of each other. I know that might sound weird, but let's see what we're talking about. And Sister Rukhsar did a phenomenal job of explaining this earlier. I'll reiterate it with a little bit of a different flavor. Our own Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salam has guided us on how to harmonize different parts of our life. Our time should be shared across 4 different slices of the pie, leisure being one of them, God being another, socialization, and work. But not this hard line of 25%. So please ignore those 25 percentages that are around the circle. Why? We all have 24 hours in a day. I, for one, I do sleep for 8 hours. I work for 8 hours. That means I have 8 hours left to get to 24. And I'm an honest person. I do not spend 8 hours a day with God at this point in my life. Okay. And I don't spend 4 hours or 8 hours with my family or my neighbors and my friends every day. So that 25% split is just not going to work on a daily basis. And trying to balance it, you're going to be frustrated and you're going to fail each day. So the harmony actually comes in when we let these slices ebb and flow. And what do I mean by that? So when you're on vacation, that light blue leisure pie slice, that's going to expand, which means the rest of them shrink. During Muharram, during Ramadan, the God and the socialization slices might take over, right? And leisure and work might shrink a little bit. And when there's a big project at work, then the yellow work slice might take over. But when just a reminder, public message here, important one. When I was vetting the slide with Sheikh Madaris to make sure that I was quoting it accurately, he did say, no matter how small the God slice becomes, don't forget your 17 rakat. So I had to make sure I got that across in the presentation. So what am I saying? I'm saying it's what Sister Rukhsar and what Sister Shabnam said much more eloquently. It's about where you choose to put your time in at any given point, right? So in a day, one slice might be bigger. At a certain stage in your life, one slice might be bigger. At a later stage, different slices might be bigger. There's no balance. It's a matter of focusing on the right thing at the right time. So how do we achieve this idea in a practical way? I'm going to take us through 5 areas, 5 practical tips. One of them, we can take some tips away from Gen Zers. Number 2, multitasking is a trap, so stop it. Number 3, take part in that leisure pie. Find a hobby and take time to invest in that pie. Number 4, you heard my sister say it before, it's okay to not have perfection. It's okay to have incompletions. And number 5, stop giving up your vacation time. Take it, like Sister Shabnam just told us. All right, so let's dive into these areas one by one. The first one, believe it or not, Gen Zers can actually teach us something. Now, Gen Zers, I'm not hating on you, all right? So just wait for it. We'll go through the generations here, and then we'll get into what I'm talking about. So Gen Z, born between 97 and 2012, they just recently entered the workforce. Millennials, we've been working with them in the workforce for a little while, born between 80 and 96. Gen X, that's people like me, 46-ish. And boomers would be somebody like my parents, right? So with that said, what can Gen Zers teach us? Gen Zers are demanding work that's meaningful to them versus get ahead at any cost or whatever profession pays the highest. We heard some of that from Sister Rukhsar in terms of which professions she's considering. I've assigned projects at work to Gen Zers. For the first time in my decades in corporate America, I've heard, no thanks, that's not interesting to me, or I don't have the bandwidth and that's going to add to my stress. Gen Z, like me, we always said, yes, thank you for the development opportunity, right? Even if we didn't have room on our plate or we had too many balls on the plate, too many pink, it didn't matter. We started making a mountain on that plate of balls, a pyramid, right? You just said yes and thank you for the development opportunity. Gen Zers, they want to do what they care about right out of the gate. So the pandemic, racial injustice, the climate crisis, they are more real for the Gen Zers than for any other generation. And this is going to be a big part of their problem. So they want to do purpose-driven work and they want to change this intolerable situation. Now, me, my parents, my grandparents, we went to work primarily to make money, right? And then when we wanted to do good work, we went to the masjid, we went to volunteer organizations, SMC, IMI. Gen Z, it's a generation that's not necessarily affiliated with organized religion or volunteer organizations. So their employer is where they make the connection to society, to their hopes, to their dreams, to make the world a better place. They connect their employer with their passion and their purpose. So connecting your purpose with your employer, ideal way to gain harmony in your work and life. And then when you do that, integrating them, the ebb and flow and weaving the hours of the day won't bother you. Gen Zers understand that workplace is not actually a place. They started their careers in the midst of a pandemic. They are demanding more autonomy, more than any generation before. Now, Gen X, we asked for this, but we were told that's for slackers. So we did it anyways, feeling guilty and in hiding, right? But Gen Z is making it the norm. They also prioritize mental health. They've shed the stigma around discussing mental health issues in the office. They openly take days off to address anxiety, depression, or burnout. They carve it out. Look at Simone Biles, a 4-time Olympic gold medalist who's willing to step away from the Olympic competition because she was not in the right state of mind and she wasn't apologetic for it. Osaka, the #2 tennis player in the world, she stepped away from the French Open, withdrew from Wimbledon to prioritize her mental health, unapologetic. Gen Zers therapy is as normal to them as a weekly trip to Trader Joe's for groceries, as it should be. Emotional hygiene is just as important as other types of hygiene. Can you imagine our boomer generation saying that? That's a millennial Gen Z thing, and we're now learning it from them, right? And finally, A generation that does not care about log kya kahenge, what will people say?
And I don't know if you guys know this, but every time a brown father says "Lo kya kenge," a star actually falls from the sky. Do you know? Mom, Dad, I don't want to be a doctor. Are lo kya kenge? No. I don't want to marry so-and-so. Are lo kya?
They don't care, finally. So we have a lot to learn from Gen Zers, believe it or not. What are some other ways to find harmony in our work and our life? Multitasking, let's not get duped into it. And ladies, it's especially for us because we do a lot of it. Now, by default, we turn to women when we need non-promotable tasks done at work. And we women, we say yes. Why? We can't violate expectations. Log kya kahenge? What are people going to say? So many of you Gen Xers and millennials can relate to this poor woman. She's saying, you're telling me I'm supposed to keep my child alive, educate them, play with them, keep them off their devices, house clean, keep my relationship alive, have my career aspirations, meditate, keep my friendships alive, 10,000 steps a day, be a size 8. Oh yeah, eat healthy and sleep too. This poor lady, she's trying to balance all 4 slices of life into 25%, exactly, mind-blowing, into those quadrants, and she is spent. So please know that multitasking is a myth. In fact, IBM is the first one who coined that term for machines. And then they saw people sitting there typing and talking at the phone at the same time. They said, oh, humans can multitask, right? And then they saw women can do it a lot better than men. But studies show that multitasking diminishes productivity. In fact, it does so by 40%. So our brains cannot multitask. Our brains can parallel path. It's just not effective. And like I mentioned, it's a vicious cycle for women more than it is for men. There's office work, there's office housekeeping, which is a real thing, the mental load of domestic labor. And I'm talking about the mental, not just the physical, because with every task, there's planning. And then there's the wrap up at the end. And then when things go wrong, replanning, child rearing. We're doing it the most. So let me know if any of these things sound familiar at work. Oh, can you just review this for me really quickly before I send it out? Do you mind taking the minutes? Can you pick up a birthday cake? It's John's birthday on your way into the office. Hey, Mom, what's for dinner? Oh, you're so good at organizing the Ramzan potluck. Do you mind doing it again this year? Sounds familiar, right? These, and we don't say no, and we know why we don't say no, right? All right, so let's take a look at this example. This is Professor Robert Kelly. He's giving an interview to the BBC. This happened back in 2017. This video went viral, so you might have seen it. Now, men, all I have to say is I'm not hating on you, but there's no woman in the world that was impressed with the way Professor Robert Kelly handled this.
Scandals happen all the time. The question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals?
And what will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me.
That's right,
Pardon me. My apologies.
So yeah, that's how he handled it. Now, let's see how a woman can handle the same situation.
The question now is, how do people respond to their scandals?
For the wider region, I think one of your children has just walked in, but I mean, shifting sands in the region, do you think relations with the North may change?
It's unclear at the moment what effect former President Gun-hae's impeachment will have on the territories. Unfortunately, discontent in South Korea is not only related to President Gun-hae's administration.
Okay.
This is a major embarrassment for South Korea, who often criticizes the North of corruption, and who now find themselves in the middle of a massive corruption case themselves.
Sorry, you do look rather busy there. We can reschedule this.
President Gun-hae is very likely to face jail time too.
Okay.
I would argue, in an attempt to make an example of her.
Right, so what does this all mean for the future of South Korea?
So the future of South Korea really hangs in the balance.
Oh my God, is that a bomb?
And it will be
Goodness
interesting
me.
to see how the North reacts to this new shift in power.
Indeed. Well, this certainly has been. Sorry,
I've looked everywhere. I've looked in the sock drawer.
Your husband is.
I anticipate there'll be more to come.
All right, so women on the call, while we can do that, we can all do that. We need to stop doing that. It's what's burning us out. So to summarize this section, multitasking is a hoax. Our brains cannot multitask. They only parallel process sequentially. And women, we get duped into this because we're taught we're better at it. We think that's flattering and we take on more. We say yes because log kya kahenge. All right, hobbies. They're really important to help us achieve that work-life balance. Tapping into creativity through hobbies helps us untangle those larger problems at work. A study showed that, like our buddy Forrest Gump here, when CEOs run marathons, they have better company performance. You don't have to be a CEO or run a marathon, but find a hobby. It'll help you be more effective at work or family problem solving. Now, if you're like me, you're thinking, is it too late for me? Because now I'm in my 40s and 50s and all of my 20s and 30s were spent climbing the ladder at work and child rearing. It's not. And the way you achieve it is carving out that slice of the pie called leisure and protecting it. And that means saying no to socialization sometimes and not taking that call from your boss at night or responding to that email from your boss on the Sunday morning. And yes, even to that fourth Majlis that you're invited to next weekend. Did I say that out loud? Did. Okay, moving on. Another way to achieve work-life balance is getting comfortable with incompletions. Arianna Huffington, who's an author, a columnist, founder of Huffington Post, the list goes on, tells us to get comfy with completions. She came to this realization after she had a major breakdown herself. So we believe that downtime is a problem. And this goes back to the Industrial Revolution when we began revering machines and software, both of for which downtime was to be minimized. And it was a problem. But for the human operating system, it's not a bug, it's a feature. Arianna says, every leader now needs to be able to navigate turbulent, uncertain waters and be able to look around corners and see icebergs before they hit the Titanic. So imagine if you are a leader at work, you're not paying attention to the recession, the pandemic, the climate crisis, the war, the supply chain implications. If you're not seeing those things and how they're impacting your business, your department or your business is going to sink. So it's innovation and creativity. Those are the first qualities that go when we're depleted and we're exhausted. So downtime is not a nice to have. And this is something that I'm recently realizing actually in my mid-40s is your worth is not measured by your productivity. You've got to delegate. You got to be a leader who doesn't burn out. And that means you have to delegate. You heard this from the sisters before me. That does mean accepting work that's not 100%, but good enough from the person who you delegated to, because it leaves you room to actually zoom out and look at the big picture, see that iceberg. And getting comfortable with incompletions at the end of the day. Look, we can all stay up all night, right? We can catch up on those emails, those texts, handling things, but only we can declare an end to our workday, nobody else. Like Sister Ruxar said earlier, we got to take care. We got to say, nobody's going to do it for us. And the quote, I'm going to put a quote in here. The phone is not really a phone, it's a nuclear weapon. It's a repository of every problem, every project, every compliment, we need to separate ourselves from it. Yet 72% of us sleep with their phone cuddled beside our nightstand or by our pillow. Another point, the corporate infrastructure that's made it so challenging for women, it's finally crumbling and it's begging to be reinvented. And there's no question that the past burnout has disproportionately affected women. Women in highly stressful jobs, we have higher instances of diabetes, heart disease. We're impacted by stress more deeply. But women who choose to stay within the current infrastructure and change it, they're doing a tremendous service for themselves and those who follow. How do you change it? Simple things like this. Mark your calendar, mental health time. Mark your calendar, focus time. It's when I need to get my work done. Mark your calendar for Jummah prayers. I do that now when my boss knows not to invite me or call me during that slot. Mark your calendar for kids' appointments and don't be apologetic about any of this stuff. And again, you heard this from Sister Shabnam too. After the pandemic, seeing families and friends get sick and some of them unfortunately leave before time, people are no longer seeing their lives in terms of the next step on the career ladder. Unless it's what fulfills them, that's fine. And this contributed to the recent great resignation that you all heard of. So work-life harmony is much more likely if you're fulfilled by your work. If you need to get off that ladder because you see something cool and new when you're up there, get off. Find another one. So in a nutshell, stop burning yourself out by multitasking and be okay with good enough sometimes. The last topic, achieve work-life harmony by taking your vacay. During the pandemic, we shortened or postponed, canceled our time off. Business owners are in fact the worst. Over half of them didn't take any vacation in the past year. And before the pandemic, almost 1 billion days went unused. We're giving it away for free. So use it. If you get tired, rest, don't quit. And finally, I want to conclude with, as I continue to fill in my squares, as the weeks slip through my fingers, I hear Surah Asr in a very different way now. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. By time, indeed, mankind is in a loss. So remember, achieving work-life integration harmony, it's about letting the four slices ebb and flow. And while I hope you'll adopt some of these practical tips, be careful not to become too much like a Gen Zer. That's it. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time, everybody.
Thank you so much, Sister Amna. And I think that you did a wonderful job of, again, incorporating some of the messages that we heard from Sister Shabnam and Sister Rukshar. And I think, you know, if I can sort of speak as an audience member, sort of the takeaway is that regardless of whether you are a stay-at-home parent, a mother, if you're caring for your elderly parents, or if you're a student, whether you're single, whether you're married, you know, those different components in life exist for all of us. So whether, you know, you might not be somebody who goes to a 9-to-5 job, but you might be a parent, or you might be taking care of your own parents, or you might be studying. And so we just have to modify those terms in the way that applies to us, because I think we're very good at exempting ourselves and saying, well, that doesn't apply to me because, or that doesn't apply to me because, and, you know, because we don't value our own well-being enough. And as a person who we can see the rise of things like anxiety disorders, mood disorders, we see the rise of things like autoimmune disorders, because we are learning so much more these days, the talk of the mind and gut connection. You know, I'm a person that has an autoimmune disorder that is highly affected by stress. And again, as a person who is also in her 40s, it seems that it has taken this long to finally say, wait, you know, what I have been doing too much for everybody, and what has it all been for, you know? And for anybody looking, thinking, well, you know, I don't have vacation time, or I don't do this, or I don't, there are other ways for, now I will use myself as an example. My children go to karate classes multiple times a week, and I used to go down and watch them every single time. And now I drop them off and I pick them up, and I take that 30-minute class to just sit sometimes and do nothing. Initially, I used to sit there and I can fold a load of laundry, I can grade some papers in this, I can return some, but I just sit. Or sometimes I sit in the car and I just scroll my phone, or I'm learning Spanish on Duolingo or whatever. And that's how I found a way to carve some time for myself. So I think what's important for us all to take away and understand is that self-care piece, that downtime, that leisure time doesn't have to look the same. You know, sometimes people hear self-care and they think, I have to go to the spa, or I have to get a pedicure, or what, you know. Maybe you just want to sit down and curl up with a book and a hot chocolate, and that's your self-care. You know, maybe it's a conversation with a friend that uplifts you. And as an introvert myself, you know, I thought for a time that lockdown was great until I reconnected with some friends and realized, no, we all need each other. We're human beings and we're made to have contact with each other. And to put boundaries for those people who drain your energy and to open up the time for the people who lift you up and fill you up, and you walk away from those interactions feeling so wonderful. And I cannot possibly begin to thank you enough. I think that, we haven't received any questions in the chat, but I think it's because you've shared so much that we've all been relating to, and all of you have made points that have made me, and I think the rest of us, sit here and go, I relate to that, I connect to that. And I'm sure every single name that we see on this screen has a very unique life that's different from the other, but these concepts apply to all of us. And I think as women, if we can just be vulnerable enough in this day of social media and this competitiveness, of I woke up at 5 and I made a homemade meal, and then I went to the gym, and then I brought my kids home and I played with them, and then I made this wonderful date with my husband, and that, no. If we can just be real and say when we're struggling and say when it's all too much, and give each other permission and give ourselves permission, first of all, to take care of ourselves. Let's take away the guilt. We're not taking away from anybody. We're actually going to refuel ourselves so we can come back and be better at all of these different roles that we play in our lives. And there are some comments that we received. The first one is that a lot of people are saying thank you for these for the beautiful breakdowns, and a lot of people are saying they remember utilizing many of these things when they were students themselves. And it's interesting that none of you collaborated on these presentations, but the underlying message, subhanAllah, is very similar, and it's just repetitive, repeating this idea of redefining balance, redefining success, redefining what makes you feel at peace, and knowing that it's not about equality, it's just about giving time and energy to what is needed at any given point in time for your own well-being. We're going to be pulled in different directions, and we can't possibly be divided equally. And I'm not sure if there is a way for, if anybody wants to have further feedback or ask further questions. I know we are recording this, and so when it does get posted, perhaps there could be some comments and dialogue happening, and it would be wonderful for the dialogue to happen between our audience members and our participants as well. But I really cannot thank you enough. I think you've given us all so much to think about. I think every single person here has felt seen and heard and validated, because we've all at some point in things that you've said recognized ourselves. So thank you so much for giving us permission to self-reflect, to not feel guilty, to put ourselves on the list. And I think one of the most important takeaways is also we are role models for the next generation. We want our kids to learn to prioritize themselves and know that they are here to serve Allah, to serve themselves, as well as serving others. Your value does not just come from what you can do for other people. So a lot of people are saying they've learned a lot from the conversation. It's a very informative workshop. And as I always say, if each one of us can just have one takeaway, then that is going to continue tenfold into our lives. And God bless you all. And inshallah, you will be rewarded for the amazing work that you've done, the time that you've put into this, the time that you've taken away from whichever portion of the pie that you had to contribute tonight. And it's truly been an honor and an eye-opening and learning experience for me and for all of us. I would like to thank you all very, very much and give you each an opportunity for a last closing statement. And let's start with the same order that we presented. Sister Rukshar.
I just want to take a moment to thank everyone here, SMC, IMI, the lovely ladies that I've had the honor of sharing this space with, as well as Haj Reza. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to share some of my wisdom. And I think Sister Amina put it in the best way. I am a reflection of Gen Z, though for a long time I did not consider myself to be, but they do have a lot to offer in terms of how we can rechannel the way we find happiness and harmony in our life. And if there's one important thing that I can stress is that and I hope that I can speak on behalf of the ladies here as well, that none of us have learned these lessons from the womb out. We have really struggled and reached that point in our lives where we've learned these lessons and feel very blessed to share them with others so that they can learn from them before it actually takes over them.
Thank you. Sister Shabnam?
So my parting thoughts are that sometimes in our life, we tend to focus a lot on what others fall short on. And perhaps we should disregard that and start to look at what we fall short on and work on our own growth. Because all of, and Sister Amina put it so well, that these are all gifts people have, whether it's Gen Z or boomers or Gen X, they all have gifts to contribute to each other. And there are lessons to be learned from, I can tell you, my biggest lessons I learn are from my children. And they are of different generations. And they have been an amazing roadmap for me to realize that with each generation, there is hope, there is love, there is beauty, and they will have their own struggles and they will come out shining like the rest of us, just because they recognize that. And we have given them the respect. So everyone has a gift, respect them, treat them with respect, and at the end of the day, appreciate.
Thank you, Sister Shabnam. Sister Amna?
The first thing I want to say is I'm very jealous that I didn't get Sister Rukhsar's version of the Freshman 15. I got the other version. And then I wanted to say that it's amazing to me that, like you said, Sister Layla, we're coming from such different walks of life, such different parts of the spectrum, but yet we're so aligned with the way that we think, regardless of coming from different generations. So I think it's really good to know that there's like-minded people out there that we can connect with that have common view and grounded in our faith. So it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm looking at the comments that are continuing to come in, and most of them are words of gratitude. And one common theme is how much people are learning. And I think one of the reason that maybe questions didn't necessarily come in is because people are busy writing notes. Everybody's filling up notebooks full of pages of these wonderful pearls of wisdom. And I think that, you know, knowledge is power. Knowledge gives us confidence. And hopefully whoever was not able to be here today, someone who was will go and tell them about it, and it will get passed on, and we can create this movement, you know, and lift each other up as women and support each other in taking care of ourselves and taking care of each other. And I think that Alhamdulillah, tonight has been very eye-opening, very successful, very healthy, very open and vulnerable and honest. And I bow down to all of your wisdom. And it's truly wonderful that we are all from different seasons of life, and we all have different experiences, and yet we have so much that binds us together. And thank you to the Imamiya medics for putting this on. Thank you to SMC for arranging this. And thank you for both of their continued work in the wellness field and allowing us to incorporate it with our faith, which gives us permission to prioritize it rather than, you know, feeling any kind of guilt or shame around it, which often happens. So thank you to you as individuals. Thank you to the organizations. And I am humbled and grateful, and my head is spinning with all of these wonderful words of wisdom. So I am so, so grateful to all of you, and thank you, Haj Reza, for making all of this happen technologically, because I would have been useless at that.
Thank you for leading us, Sister Layla.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Walaikum assalam.
Absolute pleasure. Alaikum assalam, everyone. Take care.